morning, everyone. Hope everyone is doing good. Happy to be at the TSS for one more lecture. Today, we are going to be talking, Teresa is going to give us beautiful talk about the false Christ, false prophets. We are all looking forward to that. Today, we are going to be reading the book from the book Happy Life from Givaldo Pereira Franco and Joana Gilges. Contain your impulses, which arise from uncontrolled instincts, and act under the command of reason. It is true that logic feelings can melt the ice of rational logic. However, it is often the case that the coldness of emotion or its aggressive madness requires the vigilance of reason. Head and heart must act together, providing the advantages of balance and measure to create a healthy life. Listen with your feelings and act with your reason, keeping the two in just the right proportion. So let's close our eyes, elevate our thoughts to God, our Creator, to Jesus, our Master of Love, our guiding light, and to all the spirits present here today, the incarnate and discarnate ones. May God give us peace of mind so we can hear His messages through Teresa. May all the good spirits present here today give Teresa the clarity of mind so she can give her to us our best. So be it. Teresa?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's always good to be here with all of you and be back for another lecture. So as Sandra was saying, today we're going to be talking about the false Christs and false prophets, which is chapter 21 of the Gospel according to the Spiritism. But before we're going to talk about item 20 or chapter 21, it's very interesting how Kardec wrote the Gospel according to the Spiritism, and there is no mistakes or coincidences here because this chapter comes right after the chapter 20, which is called The Workers of the Last Hour. So in the chapter 20, The Works of the Last Hour, Kardec actually talks about how we, and actually one of the spirits and the spirits teachings at the end, talks about how we spiritists are the workers of the last hour, because we now have all this knowledge. We are in the last hours because we know we are under the spirit of renovation of this, of transition of the planet. We're going from expiation to renovation. And this is happening, and we pretty much at the end of these transformations, and we now, with all this knowledge that we have, we are those workers. That's what they say, spiritists, you are the workers of the last hour. But then right after it comes this chapter that talks about false Christs and false prophets. So it's almost say, hey, you have all the power to be the workers of the last hour, but what's the quality of the work that you're doing? How would distinguish the good workers from the bad workers, right? So then comes this chapter here that talks about false Christs and false prophets. And the chapter starts being two passages from the gospel that I'm going to be reading, because the whole chapter and everything I'm going to be talking about today is basically withdrawn, is taken, right? It's the essence from those two passages. So the first passage says, "Beware of false prophets who come to you covered in the skins of sheep, but who on the inside are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruit. Can grapes be picked from thorn bushes or figs from briars? Thus, every tree is a good produce good fruit, and every tree that is bad produces bad fruit. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, nor can a bad tree produce a good fruit. Every tree that does not produce good fruit will be cut down and cast into the fire. Hence, You will know them by their fruit. And this is in Matthew. And actually, Luke also has a passage that's very, very similar to this one, to Matthew. Like different words here and there, but it's very similar. Okay? And the second passage says, take care so that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ, and they will deceive many. Many false prophets will appear who will deceive many people, and because iniquity will abound, the charity of many will grow cold. But he who perseveres to the end will be saved. Therefore, if someone says to you, the Christ is here, the Christ is there, do not believe him, for false Christs and false prophets will appear and will perform great prodigies and amazing things to the point of deceiving the elect themselves, if possible. And this is a passage on Matthew, and it's a passage on Mark as well. So when we read those two passages from the Bible, it's very easy for us to connect them when we think about the false Christs or the false prophets. It's very easy for us to connect with so many religions that we see these days, and not only these days. If you really look historically in the last 2,000 years, how much religion has been used to exploit, to dominate, for their own greed and my own, like to acquire material things and wealth and fortune, right? But we see, especially in the last few decades, the rise of so many new religions, and a lot of them called Christian religions, but bringing really speeches that don't match with the laws of love and fraternity that Jesus brought to us, the teachings that Jesus brought to us about do not judge, be tolerant, be forgiven, right? So it's very easy when we look to this passage and say, oh yeah, now we can look and I can see here the false prophets as being those religions that are brought actually just for the people's own benefits, not really to benefit people. But what we're going to be talking today is in a different aspect. What we're going to be talking today is another aspect of this passage that actually what it seems that we are all a little bit prophets, aren't we? If the past chapter said that we are the workers of the last hour, now we have all this knowledge, aren't we a little bit of prophets in here? Don't we have the work here of our prophets as well, right? But then we can ask, well, how can we be prophets, right? Well, the problem that we don't see ourselves as being prophets, it's because of the meaning of the word prophet got lost through the centuries. So what is the real meaning of prophet? So that's what the gospel tells us in this chapter. That's how it starts the chapter. So let's first talk about what it is a prophet, because otherwise we don't understand this passage completely. Yeah, we understand just a piece, but we don't understand completely. So the true meaning of the prophets, and even if you look at the Old Testament, is this. A prophet applies to all who have been sent by God with the mission of instructing humankind and revealing the hidden things and mysteries of the spiritual life. Hence, a person can be a prophet without making predictions. Because unfortunately, over the years, we thought that that's a prophet it is. That a prophet is someone who makes predictions of the future, who has premonitions, so very highly connected to mediumship. So we saw prophet, the people who prophesized the future, right? But the truth is, that's not the real meaning of prophet. In fact, if you look to the Old Testament, there's many prophets in the Old Testament, and even divided like in the major prophets and the minor prophets, and not all of them prophesied anything. None of them brought anything to us, really, in terms of seeing the future. What they brought was knowledge to us. So Moses, for example, was a prophet who brought us the knowledge of there is just one God. Because until then, what we thought was there was the God of the sun, the God of the harvest, the God of the moon, so many gods, right? The God of fire. And then he goes and says, no. I'm here to reveal. So that's what he did. He revealed to us something that was hidden from the spiritual life. There was, hey, there's only one God to obey, one God that, controls this whole universe. And so many others that brought us things that is when we're prepared to get this information about the spiritual life, because that's who we are. We're mortal spirits. This life is temporary, right? So prophet, in the real sense, is an educator. That's what a prophet is, an educator. Yes, some of them did predictions. Yes, some of them did predictions, but that's not the main meaning of the word prophet. Prophet is actually an educator. So it's funny because we never see Kardec as being a prophet, but he is. How many hidden mysteries? Because that's what the hidden mystery is talking about. That is not the mysteries in terms of the mediumship talk. No, it's the mysteries of spiritual life. How much he brought to us. How much layers he took it out, talking about how the spiritual world exists, how we interact with it. All knowledges from the spiritual life that we had no clue before Kardec came, and this is serious and not a coincidence. He was an educator actually as a background, right? So he was an educator twice. He was an educator as a background, and he became an educator as bringing the spiritism to us, right? Being a prophet of Jesus actually, right? So many things we learned from Kardec, bringing these veils, taking the veil out of the concept of a hell and heaven, that there's no such a thing. What exists is the consequence, is the law of action and reaction, right? Bringing us the concept of a God that's pure love and gives us the chance to rebuild by how? By reincarnation. A concept that, yes, there's some cultures had it already. The Hindus had this concept for many years, but we didn't. So that's what he did. He came and educated us, right? That's what a prophet is. So then it starts to make it a little bit easier for us to see how can we all be a little bit of prophets. Like, no, we're not like any big prophets, but can we? Are we educators? Don't we have all the knowledge from spiritism? Is there a coincidence that the spiritism, something that's so strong in Brazil, all of a sudden has people migrating everywhere in the world? And if you really go outside Brazil, the majority of spirit centers that started, like in States, Canada, whole Europe, is by Brazilian people who are spiritists in Brazil, who and start spiritist centers to educate, to broaden this knowledge, to bring this knowledge to other people. I'm a little bit prophets in there, and of course being a very humble age, like there's no, I don't know anybody means like, oh, we're prophets. It's not there, but you know what I mean. But in the sense of educator, and that's the problem. We still have that sense in our mind that a prophet, someone that's like, oh, it's a medium. No, it's just an educator. It's just someone who has some knowledge and shares, but the knowledge about the spiritual life, about the moral life that we live. That's a prophet, actually, an educator. So how can we recognize a good prophet? How can we differentiate a good prophet from a false one, a true one from a false one? Because that's what the chapter is talking about, right? And that's the problem, because until these days, when we think about prophets, we're still thinking about the phenomena, right? So we think that I'm going to recognize a good prophet, a true prophet, by how much power he has, how much mediumship he has, right? Oh, this is a really strong medium. Oh, this is a good prophet or a good educator. Not necessarily, right? But that's what it is. We're still looking for phenomena. But the truth is that the true prophet is recognized by his or her actions and not by the mediumship capacity. That's how we recognize a good prophet or a good educator. Because the truth is, I can have like a mediumship extremely flourished in me and be very strong, but I have no moral values. Just because I have a Ferrari parked in my garage, which I don't have, but if I had, it doesn't automatically make me a good driver. I don't become an Ayrton Senna just because I have, a Formula One car parked in my car, like in my garage, right? So it's the same thing. Just because I have the power to have a mediumship, it doesn't necessarily makes me a good educator. It doesn't necessarily that what's coming out of me, it's good. Right? So that's the problem. It's very hard for us to distinguish good from false. And I think it's a lot is because where we still connect with the word prophet. If you really take the word prophet and just change for educator, because that's what a prophet is, then it starts to become a little easier for us to say, now we understand how to differentiate the good from the false prophet. So they are actually recognized by their true acts of charity. So someone who's a good prophet, it's someone that their actions will reflect the good for the others. So someone who's here to help one another, to someone who really understands the laws of love your neighbor as yourself. And once we understand that, then we start to be able to recognize the true from the false prophet. And because that's exactly what the passage brings to us. It says the tree is recognized by the fruit, but the fruit is consequence of the tree, right? So a lot of times we worry about offering something, but we forget to do inner transformation. We forget to do the process of dealing with the issues of inner transformation, of self-improvement, right? And that's why a lot of times the fruit still comes out deficient. Because if you don't change the tree, which is us, because that's what the parable is, make the comparison. It's in the tree, it's us. And the fruit is what comes out of us, is our actions, right? But I won't change what's coming out of the tree if you don't change the tree first. So we need to go to this process of self-awareness, of inner transformation, so we can slowly change the color of the fruits that come out of us, right? And that's why in the book Renunciation, it's one of the books from Emmanuel that through Chico Xavier. It's one of the books when he talks about one of his previous reincarnations. It's in a fantastic book. It's actually one of my favorites of his romance. And the main spirit is Alcyone, and Alcyone at some point brings a teaching that it's so important for us that she says, Christ's message needs to be known, meditated on, felt, and lived. And she even says, and it has to be in the sequence. You cannot change the sequence. So first we need to know, then we need to meditate, think about, research, really. And this process automatically is going to try to start to bring us the feeling. So I start to look inside myself and feel like, oh, I need to change this. I used to do things in this way. Now that I have this knowledge and I have meditating on, I'm starting to see that I need to change the feelings inside of me. And maybe I need to become a little more tolerant, a little more patient, or a little more forgiving, whatever it is that each one is to work inside. And then eventually we start to live it, which means we start to act. So then our fruits start to change as well. What comes out of us start to change as well. And this message that bringing from her, that she brings, it's so important that these days, FED, so the Brazilian Spiritist Federation, has a whole, started about a year and a half ago, a new series of study of the gospel, which I don't even know how to translate that in English, but what they do is Estudo do Evangelho Redivivo. So basically, it's a study of the gospel, trying to bring to the roots of the gospel. And it's based on this phrase from Alcyone from the book Renunciation. So the way that the study is done in that way, is to know. So every time we do it, and I'm very grateful to participate in one of the groups. They have 6 groups right now, and I think next year they're going to start at least 2 or 3 new groups. It's all based in this. So the methodology that we use is this. So we get a passage, we read it, so now we know the passage. We meditate upon it. And every time at the end, the question is always, how did it make you feel today? That's always the question that made to us in the end. How did it make you feel today? Right? How did teachers touch you today? How are you feeling today? Because then if you do this process, then we can change. So FEB now is really taking this to a very serious way because it is the path. And Alcyone says you cannot change the trajectory, right? Trajectory is that one. So the first step is to study. And the truth is, as a spiritist, we need to do a more profound study of the gospel and of the codification. So this week, as I was preparing, I was watching this, it's actually a study. It's a few people from FEB. One of them is Célia Ricarvalho, who actually she facilitates the study of the gospel at the Spiritist Federation in Brazil. And she said that at the end of every year, she always asks the same question to her group and say, what are we studying? And they say, oh, we're studying the gospel. And she goes, no, we're studying the gospel according to Spiritism. So she says the codification is made of 5 books. There's the Spirit's book, it's the Medium's book, the gospel according to Spiritism, heaven and hell, and Genesis. So if you don't study all 5 books, you don't know the codification. Because sometimes I have the discussion, well, what's the main book? What's the main one? Oh, it's the Spirit's book, or it's the gospel. She goes, the codification is the 5 books. We need to study the 5 books. This is how I'm going to study the gospel. I'm going to study the gospel according to Spiritism, if I don't understand Spiritism, if I haven't read the codification. And the codification is all 5 books. Do I need to read all 5 or the other 4 books to go to the gospel? No. But I can guarantee to you, you read the gospel today, and then slowly you're going to start working on the other books. After you have read all the other books, if you go back to the gospel, you understand it's completely different. It opens to you a new light, like a new level of knowledge. Because the codification is not the Spirit's book or the gospel. That's all we thought to codification those two books together. No, the codification is all 5 books. We need to start to study. We need to start to get more profound in the studies of the Spiritism. And why we need so much in the study, why Alcione said we need to first to know. We need first to go there and read and study. It's very simple. Because nobody opens the horizons to new truths without studying. If I read something and I never read anything else about that subject, how am I going to increase my knowledge? I won't. So the only way for me to bring new realities, new truth, and really new understanding and expanding myself intellectually and morally, is by studying. It's by getting those books. It's going start with the codification, then go to Andrea Luiz, go so many books from Chico, from Givaldo, and other really important writers that we had that brought us, or mediums that brought us books that are so important. What we need. That's the beginning. Otherwise, how am I going to do inner transformation? Transform what? What I have right now is good. Right? So there's only and I'm going to meditate upon art. I don't have any new knowledge to come. So we need to study. We need to know that. I always start with the study. That's why also human beings know. We have to know. We have to study. Okay. And then, but that's just to read, because read is very easy. To read the book is very easy. But it's not, but we have to meditate upon it. So it's not just a matter of getting the book, and that's why when we do our studies here on Wednesdays or on Thursdays, what we do, we get a piece, we read, and then we talk about what do you think? I feel this, I understand that, because that's what it's meditating. It's studying, because that's a way of study, but at the same time, I have to meditate, because not I have to talk about what I just read, I'll have to think about, wait a second, what is saying? Yeah, I'm thinking about, now I remember, yesterday when I was doing this, I did something, now I remember that, I should have maybe acted in a different way, so start to connect and meditate and look inside. When you start to look inside what you're now trying to do, we automatically start to bring the feeling. Because I read, now I know, I meditated upon, and I start to look inside. And then I start to think, wow, I need to change a little bit. We have a friend here in TSS that I remember him one time saying, before I started studying Spiritism, I was a completely different person. He said I would be in the office, and every time that the person from the cleaning service would come to empty my garbage, whatever, he said I wouldn't even look in their faces. I really thought they were like minor people, and actually wouldn't even bother. It's like I'm working, this person's here trying to empty my garbage. I wouldn't say good morning, nothing. Says after Spiritism, I look at back like, oh my gosh, what I was doing. See, so now I start to see that first they're not minor, they're just like me. When they come, I say good morning, and I thank them because thanks to their service, my office area is clean. That my garbage it's empty, so I can keep putting more garbage in there. So completely different. So that's someone who got the knowledge, meditated, looking inside, and said, I need to change that action. And that's what it is. I'm going to change every single action that I do. No, we're not talking about being perfect here. We're talking about starting to look, have a feeling, and then see the action outcomes different. So the fruit that comes out now is different. Some situations are still not doing it. That's fine, but we're changing field. So there is a transformation. It's huge. No, it's small, but it's very important. Any small transformation is very important, right? And actually, I would like to think that there's not such a thing as a small transformation. It is a transformation. That's what it's important, right? And I'm pretty sure that all of us can easily look to ourselves 10, 15, some of us here can, like me, can start to look 30 years ago and still be an adult, and just thinking of, well, how much it changed. You know, things that before I didn't tolerate it, I was way more tough, I was more, now I'm more, more mellow, I'm more, or more tolerant, or more patient. It did change. Are we perfect? Not even close to it. But are we better? I think we are, right? But it comes from this knowledge, it comes from meditating, comes from feeling it, right? And why it's important to have all these 4 pieces? Know, meditate, feeling, and action. Because the truth is, and that's what Celia was saying in this thing that makes so much sense, we still can know, meditate, and act, and the fruit still comes deficient. Because there's no feeling. So when we do something, when I meditate, I know, okay, I know this is the right thing to do. And then I meditate and I'm just acting because it's the right thing to do, just because the law of society tells me that's how to do. Because if it wasn't a law, I wouldn't do it. Or I just say good morning to every people in the morning when I come to the office, just because apparently it's polite and that's what I should do. But honestly, if I could, I want to say good morning to anybody because I really don't care how people are doing it. I prefer. But I do just because there is a social rule that says I have to say good morning to someone in the morning. Yes, I know. I meditate, so I think that's the right thing to do, and I act. But there's no feeling. I didn't do because inside of me, I think this is the right thing to do. Because it is nice to say good morning to someone, or it's nice to help someone because it is in me. There is a feeling in there, right? So just to make it a little bit easier to understand, you can have 2 people doing exactly the same action. So both are gonna get a sweater and donate to someone who's feeling cold. So like a homeless who's in cold. One may do just because it's the right thing to do, and we're going as a group, so we're actually going as a group and distributing all these clothes, and it's gonna look on me, good on me, because I'll go with that, because honestly, if it wasn't with the group, I wouldn't do it, right? Because actually it's a lot of work. I'm going outside but I'm gonna do it because it is the right thing to do. I know people need this sweater, and I'm going with the group, so I'm going to do it, right? And you have the person who says, you know what? There's people in need, and I'm gonna go because when I look to this person, I see my brother and my sister, and if I was in the situation, I'd like to be helped as well. So someone said something very recently, said when we should look to the people, not look at them as human beings, we should look at them as ourselves. That's how we should be. And that's what I'm doing. I'm not just doing here because it's gonna look good on me because because people are watching, because the truth is, even if people are not watching, I will do the same thing. Because I look to that person, I see that's me. That's my brother and my sister. We all are community and all need to help each other. So the sentiment here of the action is completely different. And that's what Emmanuel in the book Living Spring calls, one is the one that goes and does just because it's gonna look good on me, he calls this incomplete charity. Because yes, it is a charity. That person's gonna be very grateful that they got a sweater, but what's coming from inside me is not the real sentiment of charity, right? So because it's an incomplete charity. While the other one went really with the sensation, with the feeling of, I want to help. That's the true charity, right? And so in the end, it's the feeling that's going to give us the true meaning of our actions. It's not the action itself, but what is the feeling that I'm putting in that action? That's what's going to tell us what our true actions are. That's what's going to give the quality of our fruits coming out of our actions, right? So that's why it's so important to have all four parts in this process, right? Know, meditate, feel, and then act, right? And we're not going to get to that feeling without studying, meditating, looking inside, making changes, and then change the color of our food. So no wonder that the Brazilian Spiritist Federation is taking this so serious, this message from Alcione, right? Because now we realize that this is the path for inner transformation, for us to better ourselves. And so that's how we see how the true educators or the prophets in these kids are not, is by the color of their fruits. It's what the intention is coming out of their actions. And if we're all educators, we all have this knowledge, then that's the color of what we're bringing outside, right? But there's another way for us to understand that we are those educators, that we are those prophets. It's in a passage, in a letter, the second letter that Paul of Tarsus wrote to the Corinthians. On the second letter to the Corinthians, he says, "It is clear that you are a living letter from Christ, the result of our ministry, written not in ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts." So what Paul of Tarsus is saying to the Corinthians at the time, is actually what he says to all of us today, is that we are all living letters from Christ. So we all have the potential to be these educators. We all have the potential to be those prophets, in the sense of being an educator. So we are. So what he's saying here is like, you are the message. Like, we are the message, or we have the potential to be the message, because the true prophet is not the messenger. The true prophet is the message. His actions are the message. That's the true prophet. That's how we recognize a true prophet, is by their actions and what's the sentiment that come out of those actions, right? And if you look, for example, and you have people that, and of course, every person who is the message, they also the messenger. So, for example, a good example is Chico Xavier. He was probably one of the biggest messengers that we had as a mediumship. But it's very sad in one way that when you think about Chico Xavier, we always think about his mediumistic capacity and all the books that he brought, and it's amazing. But we forgot to see him as the message, outside doing psychographic messages, outside his mediumship, how he lived his life. He didn't just give us books, he lived the message. He was the message by the way that he lived his life, with humility, with faith, always having something good towards the others, always worrying about the others before himself. And I'm not talking here the absence of self-love, because that's something completely different and to be dealt with. But it's really like helping the others. He was the message. So yes, he was a great messenger, but he was the message. And we can say the same thing about Divaldo today, who's still here amongst us. Yes, he's a great messenger with all the psychographic messages and books that he brings from the spiritual world, but he is the message. He lives his life by what he preaches, right? If you look at his work in Brazil in Mansão do Caminho, where thousands of children are helped and everybody is embraced, and he doesn't care. He doesn't even ask what their religion is, what's their background. It doesn't matter. You need to be helped. We're gonna be helped. We're gonna give all the support. So he is the message. So that's how we're gonna recognize the true prophet, despite their actions. Do their actions match what they say? And then of course they say, oh my gosh, let's say for me, I'm here doing this lecture. When I go out there, do I do everything that's in here in the lecture? Probably not. Am I trying my best? I'm trying my best. But the reason I am here, or the reason that many of us is here, and so many other people are out there doing lectures in the spiritual set, is this, so we can exchange knowledge. What I'm doing here right now is being a messenger. I brought everything from Kardec's books, and I brought here, and we just put together to bring it here, right? And I'm trying my best to be the message. And that's what it is. That's why we need this process of know, meditate, feel, and act or live. Because then slowly we become better messages. That's what it is. The problem is that when so many times we see there comes the false educators or the false prophets. When I come here and I see beautiful lectures or Spirit Center or any other place, but then I don't believe in anything that I'm saying. I'm just using this to manipulate out there. I really don't care for anything that's in here. That's the problem, right? Because really the sentiment that I'm doing here, I'm just trying to manipulate people, right? So that doesn't mean that, oh my gosh, if I start to do a lecture somewhere, then I have to live by like on by the tip. No, it just means that I understand. I'm always such as an imperfect person as anybody else, trying my best to understand this, to feel this, and to get a little bit better fruits coming out of it, right? And because the true prophet is the message, not the messenger, when we look to the passage that says, when Matthew says, every tree that does not produce good fruit will be cut down and cast into fire. What he's saying is that if I'm a false prophet, right? If I'm a false educator, eventually my mask will fall. Because I can come here and do beautiful, because that's the thing too. We think that false prophet is the person who comes here and give false information, not necessarily. I can come here and give all the truth, real information, but just don't care for any of it. Again, I'm just using too much, because it's very easy to recognize those that come and bring false information. But how about recognizing those that bring right information, but behind acting a completely different way? It's harder, right? But that's what it is. But what Matthew is saying here is that, you know what? It doesn't matter. Because eventually the masses are going to fall. The tree is going to be cast into fire. What he's saying is that eventually we won't be able to do anything anymore. And if it's not in here, it's at the moment for discarnation, because that's the moment that the masses will fall. If they don't fall before, we'll fall at the moment of discarnation. Because when we're back to the spiritual plan, there's no masks. We are what we are, right? And we won't be able to go on. And we can see over the centuries, actually over the last 2 millennia, Jesus was the biggest prophet, the biggest educator that we have in here. He's still here with us. It's not just history, someone that we just study. No, he is here with us because he's a true prophet. And in 10,000 years, he'll still be here because it's true, and the truth stays. And everything that's false, eventually, it gets unmasked and goes down. That's what he's saying. That's what Matthew is saying here by the symbol of being cast to fire. Just saying, whatever is not built in the base is not the truth, will fall apart eventually, right? It won't sustain by itself. That's why you see that all the big empires all disappear, right? We still have Jesus here day to day, but if I ask you to give me the name of 10 emperors from the Roman Empire, I can't. Maybe two or three the famous ones, because they need movies about them, we can talk about it. Don't, they're gone. And we talk about them today as a history. Something that's happening there. They're not here with us today anymore. Their ideas are not here anymore, right? It's gone. Because it's built on false precepts, right? So it's gone. Jesus is here present. He's not just part of it. Oh yeah, there's a guy who came 2,000 years ago. No, he's here with us because it's the truth. Right? So if we really want to become the true prophets or the true educators, and we're educating all the time, we educate our kids, right? We educate the people at work and our families. It's by actions, right? It's by what we do. But we need to start this process of know, meditate on, feel, and live, right? And act upon it, right? Because that's how the gospel is really going to be in us, and not just something that we read, but something that's part of our essence, really. But also, there's one, like, just to finalize, there's one more reason why we should all study and meditate, actually. Because isn't this the chapter talking about false Christ and false prophets, how to recognize? So if I don't have a knowledge, if I don't know anything about, let's say, when a spiritist house, so let's say about the spiritist knowledge, how do I know that when I'm watching a lecture or reading a book or just being a psychographic message, how do I know if that's good or bad? This lecture right now, that Brian's watched, how do you know that I didn't give any wrong information here? If we don't study, we just say, because it came from TSS and the person, I assume that the person who's giving the lecture knows more than I do, so they must be true. Unnecessary. I have watched spiritist lectures that there's not like really major mistakes, but like that's wrong information. How do I know? If I don't study, then it becomes a blind faith when I accept just because it came from the spirit. And then it goes completely against what Kardec tried to teach us. Kardec was the biggest defender of having a rational faith. He really trying to end this blind faith where I just believe because someone said so. Right? We need to study. And actually, this past Thursday was our last study group for the gospel study that I'm doing with Fed. So Carlos Campetti came and was part of it, and he was saying exactly about that. We need exactly because that's the motor of the whole studies, the know, meditate, feel, and he was talking about that. The study is very important. He said there is right now in Brazil, and I don't know if it's, there's a very publisher, I don't know if it's online or not, or if it's a mix. He said that they say that they have 7,000 spiritist books. And Carlos said, do you guys think that we have 7,000 spiritists, which mean books that match the base and the codification, spiritist books out there, 7,000. He goes, no. We do not have 7,000 spiritist books out there. So how are we going to distinguish the good ones from the bad ones? Because I think it's very easy when I'm reading Chico Xavier, Divaldo, Ivone Amaral Pereira, Sueli Cautes, because we know those people, know their lives, they're fairly public, we know that they give the message, they're not just messengers, right? But if it's someone that I don't know, how am I going to be able to read the book and say, wait a second, there's some concepts here that's not quite well. And believe me, there's a lot of Americans there who are obsessed, who are in the process of fascination, writing books and putting out there with big names, psychographing and signing with big names, and they're just being obsessed. And the books are coming out, they're being published. And sometimes with them with very serious information in there, right? Just given a practical example, during this pandemic, we had the chance to reorganize our whole library here. And I found a book in the children's book that, thank God, was hidden and nobody ever had access to that book. And I decided to open the book and read. And I was shocked by the content of the book. The book pretty much put children against the parents. So of course we removed that book immediately from our library. Again, thank God, I didn't even know how the book got here. And it was from someone who used to be a spiritist, very, very, very famous medium, who no longer is a spiritist. But a lot of people don't know that. So I think a lot of people still think that this person is a spiritist and are reading all this children's book. The very serious content inside there. Like literally, the language was shocking, the language. And it wasn't in an indirect way, no, it's in a very direct way putting children against parents. But if you don't have any knowledge, if you don't study, if we don't, how am I gonna read something and really look, this is true or this is false? This is coming from a good educator or not a good educator? Does this match with the codification? Because the codification didn't change, even though there's some movements in Brazil that say, the codification now it's outdated. it needs to be upgraded, and they create new levels to it. It's like, since when is outdated? Since never. We didn't understand, how can we update the codification? You don't understand the codification yet. So how can it be updated? Yeah, maybe eventually when we prepare, more knowledge will be added. But the codification is the codification. We need to know, because then we can know this thing. So we need to know, just not for us to better ourselves and become better educators, but to all the people around us, but also for when we're doing our studies, we have better tools in our hands to understand what's false and what's true. Right? Because there's a lot of publications out there in the spiritist world, right? That it's false publications coming from false prophets, right? You need to be very careful. Yeah, so that's what I had to bring today. So a lot of studies, we have our studies on Wednesdays. I don't know if you have on Thursdays as well, if they're open. We do. We have studies on Wednesdays, we have studies on Thursdays. It's always good for us to do our own study, but also it's also good to do the study as a group, because then people can bring in new knowledge, and it's always enriched even more the studies when we have other people doing with us. But if you haven't started studying yet, that's the invitation today. Let's do the first, and that's okay if you haven't. Oh my gosh, I haven't read it. That's fine. Let's start. This is the moment, right? We're in the last hours, so that is the moment for us to start this process of study. Maybe some of us is already on the meditation. Some of us is already on the action. Some of us on the feeling. It doesn't matter. What's important is that we need to start this process. We need to start this path. That's what is going to connect us to Jesus, and that's going to make us to have better fruits coming out of us, who are the tree. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. I just want to add something about TSS and what we decided to do in the library.
Sure.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that we decided to clean up our library, and especially the bookstore. We only have books from Kardec, of course, Leon Denis, and like the great writers, Chico Xavier, Divaldo Pereira Franco, and we are Ivone Pereira, Raul Teixeira, and we decided to clean up our library and bookstore, just because in a way we are responsible for what people are reading, and we have to be very careful with that. Okay, so thank you so much, Teresa.
But that's what Carlos Campetti said. He said, just if you put, we don't need to have a lot of books, because even if you just put Chico alone, it's about more than 400 books.
I know.
Divaldo, I think, now it's close to 300 books. Then, and then you get like Ivone, you get how, if you have about 1,000 books, it's plenty for one incarnation, 1,000 books, right?
I think just the Kardec could be
exactly.
It's a long way to go.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Teresa, for this lecture
Anything
today.
from the internet? Any comments?
No?
No
Okay,
question.
so if you don't mind giving us our final prayer, and thank you for watching us today.